Can you bring the house lights back up for a second? I'm a freestyler, born in the 80s, grew up in the Reagan era and getting into hip-hop and skateboarding. And one of the things about lectures that keeps it very fresh for me is I never really repeat anything. So I have a lot of content, and I come up here and just kind of improvise a little bit in terms of the direction I wanted to go. So I brought with me, actually, on this trip, which this is a new strategy I developed about basically with dealing with airports. Because airports are very long expanses of, marble floors and various security measures. And to navigate those, I would always use a skateboard, like so, to go through the airport. Now, obviously, skateboarding is not allowed in airports. I'm sure you're aware. The last time you tried to skateboard in an airport, they stopped you. So, of course, for me, I use it to walk, but there's this kind of fine line of, like, you look like you're having too much fun. So I do this thing, and so I started developing these kind of strategies to navigate the real world. And the strategies were designed around phenomena that I was experiencing. So all of a sudden I had this little world of like, this is the phenomena, and this is the strategy to address that phenomena. So the phenomena in the airport, I named ambiguity of disability, because although I have crutches, I have a skateboard, and basically it's a conflict of interest, right? Like as you go on the skate, did you hurt your So in a security person's mind in an airport, 99.99999% of people are not on crutches with a skateboard. So it gets their attention, because they see a lot of people. And so the ambiguity of the disability means that they're not quite sure. So the strategy that I evolved in order to avoid an actual face-to-face conversation and allow them to make those judgments in their brain before they have to actually stop me on my path from point A to point B, I called it blowfish. Now, blowfish is, like, they get threatened, they go, right? And then they go, I think I'm cool now. And they go, so that's what I do in the airport. I do this performance of being bigger than I am, but I'm actually making the disability bigger than it really is. So normally when I walk, this is kind of what I call walking. Like, this is my version of walking. I mean, I can walk, but I can't walk a long way. So there's this whole thing like, oh, you can walk, but if you're on crutches, you can't walk, right? If you have crutches, you can't walk, If you can walk, you don't need crutches. Most people don't have this in-between notion, which is what my life is all about. It's like, I can walk, but I can't walk a long way. So when you see me skateboarding on the crutches in the airport and I do blowfish, this is what it looks like. This is what the strategy actually looks like. So normally I'd be skating along, but then I'll do this. Security, I may feel like this person is looking at me a certain way, and I'll just kind of... oh, don't bother that guy. He looks like he's hurt. But if I look like I'm having like a grand old time, like, dun, 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 yeah, where's my gate? Where's my gate? This guy's having too much fun. So the strategy of blowfish protects me from having my skateboard taken away, just by the changing just the very subtle from this to bending the knee and just kind of going a little bit slower. And those tiny little steps really are what really works. Like if I do the like like that, So that's a strategy of blowfish for the phenomena of ambiguity of disability, where people need what I call medical validation. Okay, medical validation means that I am in front of you and you can see that I can walk, right? Like, I can walk. I can't walk a long way. Well, how can you walk and still need crutches, right? Well, that doesn't make any sense. Well, then I say, well, what about you? You've got glasses on. Take your glasses off. Can you still see? Yes, but you just can't see as well. Well, that's how it is on crutches. Take those glasses off. I know you're not blind. That's the kind of how it is with the attitude about having the crutches but still being able to walk. So I get a lot of flack for that, especially in a dance club. Especially if it's another dancer that I'm making look bad. Then they're like, you don't need those crutches. You're faking. You're a faker. And, for a while, I was like, what? So I started calling this phenomena of being called a faker, or the strategy, it's still ambiguity of disability as the phenomena, and there's a lot of different forms of it, from security to somebody who you might be sharing a dance circle with. So the strategy that I evolved around the ambiguity of disability in a dance cipher context was what I call faker squared, which is faking, or faking to the second power. So that looks kind of like this, so you're walking along, and then let's say I know that the person who thinks I'm faking is watching me. Walk on my crutches, I'll do something like this. And I'll sneak in a little walk. And so it's like, they're like, oh, I knew he could walk, right? And at the same time, it gives me it reverses the relationship. In other words, I'm no longer subject to this person calling me a faker. I'm hosting their illusion of my faking. And it really is this reversal of the power dynamic around when you're the only person in the room who has a disability. So with all of these different phenomena that evolved in public space, there came all these like sort of performative elements to stay connected with my movement. So the history of the movement and the identifying the phenomena of public space started to relate to one another. And I started to realize that with every action there was a sort of a focus on what was happening. So I brought some video because I started experiencing these things and wanted to share them with people, but it's really hard to just simply talk it all out. So I started doing public performances that were engaging the public. And so they started a long time ago in the mid-90s, and this is when they first started. So I used this footage a lot to kind of introduce people to my work. And I went to Russia in the 90s. There was a big conference there, and I was like a entertainment for the conference. So what you see here is me attempting a no-footed stair spin, but it fails. So when it fails, I go into a Chaplin-esque kind of slide down the rail. And what this trick, it's not a very good shot, so I'm going to show you what an actual spin down the rail actually looks like. The stair spin is kind of like this. It looks like this. And when it's successful, but I always do it next to a rail, so if I fall, then I have somewhere to go. So this is what it looks like in real time. So it's a no-footed spin down the rail. Now, how does someone get to the position in life where they're doing no-footed spins downstairs on modified rocker bottom crutches, and if they fail, they do a Chaplin-esque sprawl down the rest of the rail? Well, it comes from a history of multiple influences throughout my life, and the first element of that was, of course, being on crutches from my early childhood. Like a lot of my early childhood, from age 5 to 12, I used crutches in various forms of braces to get around. And part of what that did was it gave me a disability-based utilitarian relationship to the crutches, where I was able to use crutches to do all these things to just keep up with my friends. Like I really wanted to keep up with my friends, and peer pressure as a child is one of the strongest forms of influence on a child's life and wanting to just be a part of whatever was going on. So I am back to the phenomenology around it, but this is all also based in a long history of using crutches. So the technical facility that is interspersed in the sociological interactions is very evolved. So, if you don't know how to do a no-footed spin down the stairs, and you're just kind of jackassing around, that's a completely different thing. In other words, this is a real fail. This isn't failing to get attention. It's not faking. It's really trying a no-footed spin down the stairs, and it really failing. And when that happens, I have certain sequence. But I wanted it to succeed because the spacing of the stairs is really good. So I come off the stairs, the people help me out, and then I go outside to the front of the market, and I am performing a simple utilitarian task. Now, what does that mean to perform a simple utilitarian task? It means in my real life, when I bend over to pick up a bottle, I bend over to pick up a bottle, right? And that's just what it is. But other people have what I call a projected narrative. In other words, they have a narrative in their head of my struggle to pick up the bottle, which is very different from what it actually is. So here you see me using my technique, which this is called a high-mid position, where the armpit is not in the armpit section of the crutch, but the elbow is threaded through. And there's a trigger finger hold here on the front. And that's called a high-mid position in the technique that I evolved around dance and movement on skateboard. So you see here the reach for the bottle. And this is, for me, a regular way to reach for a bottle. But if you notice the babushka who is exiting the Russian marketplace, she is very focused on the lift. In other words, she really wants me. She stops her path right here. She stops and watches intently at every single moment. Now, from this point of engagement on, we're in a new type of relationship, because I am, in other words, performing all this material paralleling my real life. So I'm picking up a bottle, not faking picking up a bottle, but really picking up a bottle in order to harvest the various interactions that I normally get in my real life. And no matter what it could be, I could be reaching for, to press a button to get on an elevator, and somebody will be like walking by and go, and wait till the button is, like, did he get it? Is it going to be okay? This type of pressure. And okay, it's very reasonable. I'm not saying that it's a bad thing for people to be concerned for other people trying to press a button. So here I'm reaching, and you can see her psychosomatic sort of reaction to the peak of the height of the narrative conflict of, will he pick up the bottle? So I'm lifting, and you watch the person get it. She basically is right there with me and really wants me to get the bottle, to the point that she actually lifts a little bit. If you watch really closely, I'm going to replay it here. Here we go. It's get it. So I call that a psychosomatic investment. In other words, it's not just that you're thinking it. The reaction to disability, especially when you're projecting a narrative that is very strongly related to the more tragic end of the spectrum. And you remember, the title of this presentation is Retaining Neutral Palate Through a Forest of Heroic and Tragic Positions. So, in other words, I'm retaining neutral palate. I'm not bending over and picking up the bottle like I'm going to die. And I'm not bending over and picking up the bottle like I'm Superman. I'm bending over and picking up a bottle like a man on crutches bends over and picks up a bottle. That is neutral palate. So she paints this notion of this kind of tragic narrative of, will I get the bottle? And she's so invested in it, it's a physical reaction. And I'm sure some of you have experienced seeing someone with a physical disability and literally having a physical reaction. In other words, reaction to the landscape of the disability and the landscape of the body, and your own reaction to seeing or engaging someone with a physical disability can literally change your physical sensation to almost become nervous for that person in a physical way. In other words, it's not just verbal. It's not just, oh, I'm thinking this. So this is when I began to realize, and because I was a little kid, this relationship of people watching me do stuff was really old. So I got off crutches when I was 12, and my hips basically aren't round. So that's why I can walk a little bit, but not a long way. They still work, but they don't work very well. But they're not so bad that I would get the operation, because the operations don't last. And this is all the medical validation stuff I was talking about. Like, are you really disabled? Yes, I am. Well, how are you disabled? Well, I have bilateral hip deformity from osteonecrosis of the head of the femur from leg calf birth disease, and this is the effect of it. The effect of it is that the hips degrade over time. So this is a very personal story about my own disability, but it's also about everyone in the room, because we all at one point or another are engaging perfect strangers in public space and attempting to navigate our own feelings, but then also kind of engage that other person in a way that's both respectful, helpful, and possibly in this particular situation, fateful. So this babushka is at the top of the stairs, and she forgets where she is. Whoa. And almost falls down the stairs. And, at that moment, I was like, I wanted to do something really plain, but I didn't even plan for her You know, like, in other words, I'm not taking advantage or trying to trick. It's just I was too close to the stairs, so I had to move. So this is the one relationship that I have to maybe able-bodied sort of people in public space who are interacting with me. But there's other relationships. For example, you know, I do this thing where I'm coming down the stairs and these guys are just kind of like, he's crazy, you know, like, whatever, dude. And so there is that too. Like, here's another no-footer down the stairs, you know, and, you know, they're just kind of like, it's not, it's heroic in a sense. So I'm sort of performing this kind of stunt, but it gets a lot of attention, but it's not exactly like, oh my God, he's in trouble. Now, as I started exploring sort of people's notions of my own failure, I realized that the history of disabled dance is primarily like, let's do a square dance in wheelchairs. I'm going to have a ballet company, and we're going to be mixed ability, and some of us are going to be disabled, and some of us aren't, and we're all going to do ballet together. You know, so what I started to realize was that, number one, I wanted to evolve a form of dance that was rooted in a history of physical disability that then would pass on to an able-bodied group of people. In other words, reversing the stream so that I could teach you all how to dance as if you had crutches, just like disabled people try to dance as if they didn't. You know what I'm saying? So there's a very short history of dance and disability that exists. There's not a whole lot of material out there around disabled dance companies, and a lot of the material that you do see is disabled people emulating a long history of able-bodied dance and translating the form. Instead of founding it in the actual root of the form, it's this translation from an existing form. And I always wondered what disabled dance would look like if it wasn't always sort of dynamically somehow trying to use a handle of a history of a disabled dance in order to move itself further. So we do ballet. Oh, I know what ballet is. Oh, okay, well, let's go check out ballet in a chair. Let's go check out modern in a chair. Well, what if I just called it like, it's, you know, la-di-da, you know what I'm saying? And you wanted to go see la-di-da, we don't have a handle for that. There's no handle for a history of disabled dance. So I thought, well, wouldn't it be interesting to translate my own technique on crutches to a group of able-bodied people who don't have crutches? Because if I go to a dance class and I try to take the class, everything that's done in the class I'm translating in real time to do on crutches. So I thought, well, let's see what happens when, you know, we get other dancers to emulate what it means to be on crutches without having them. So I was kind of reversing the relationship here and just experimenting with the possibilities that exist with, you know, and this is just a workshop in Finland where we were kind of working on just the very, very immediate practicalities of it. In other words, this was not a long experimental workshop where we really delved into it, but it was the beginning of a thought process for me of what does it mean to develop an authentic dance form for bodies that are not, you know, completely, you know, like the able-bodied dancer type of history and a movement, ability to movement, because I find it very hard to translate out of that history, out of the able-bodied history, to do my own, to a dance that's version. Now I am a hip-hop and street dancer, and that is a big part of it. But again, it was always a translation. So that's some of the public works, but then people were like, oh, you're just, you know, you're taking advantage of people, people's Good Samaritan notions. You're like, you know, how do we know what's happening? Like, we didn't see you do it. So I said, okay, fine. You know what I'm going to do? I'm going to then create a new project where I put everybody on a bus, and they just go with me. So instead of just having a camera guy there, there's actually a busload of audience. So I'm doing my performance in the street here. I'm dancing. I don't know why it's hanging like that, but there's the bus. Wait, I don't know if you can see the people in the bus. Let me just find. Oh, there they are. There they are. Look, right in there somewhere. Right there. Right there. So this guy comes up and hugs me, but you know, the thing about having crutches is it's very much, there's the bus. So there's the people on the bus. You can kind of see them watching. The bus, I'm connected to the bus through a DJ on the bus playing music. So I'm dancing to music he's playing on the bus because it's being transmitted to me. And the audience is also hearing the music live, and I also have a microphone on so they can hear me talking as well. So, you know, I'm doing this dance in the street, and I just wanted to show this one particular interaction that was very beautiful and kind of a real moment, because people are kind of treat you having crutches. A lot of times you become a dumping ground for sage advice. You become a magnet for other people's moments. And so he kind of approaches me during this dance performance. And, well, it's a traveling performance, so here I am going down the sidewalk just kind of freestyling, and people were kind of reacting to me like, oh, you know, he's dancing. But my whole thing was like, I want authenticity. I don't want to be controlling the frame. And the only way for me not to be editing in and out of what I was doing was to actually bring the audience with me in the street without disrupting the fabric of the street, because I'm very dependent on not having the real audience interrupted. I cannot have people in the street watching, because then the interactions of me with the general public are undermined by the notion that it's a show, it's a performance, and therefore this audience is watching, so I'm not going to interact with this performative presence in a way that's authentic. So in order to retain authenticity, the people on the bus had to be off the street but still able to see me directly in the street. And this was a way to control, in a way, also the sort of questions about the previous video I showed, where you're like, oh, that poor woman, you're tricking her, you have a hidden camera and you're editing it all. And so this was a much better way to kind of show a live audience the same kind of phenomena that the pre-recorded video was doing, but in a more direct, real way. So I don't know, this got queued up a little weird. Let me just fast forward. So there's little dancing going on. So that's like a boogaloo style of hip hop that I'm kind of throwing in. So I do skateboarding, I'll do like freezes and collapses against the wall. I'll do a little street dance. I mean, this boogaloo style is very difficult to do on crutches because you don't have range in your shoulders. So when I'm able to put those down, it becomes an entirely different dance. But there's a sweeper, and that's like particularly a traveling move. Waiting for this guy to come along. He kind of has this notion of me as a symbol for him of all the things that he'd been struggling with. So it was a very intense interaction, and I wanted to show it. I think it's right coming up right here. Oh boy, where is it? Oh yeah, okay, so this is a guy taking photos over here to the left. And here he is.
Okay. You all right?
Yeah. He said, I said, are you all right? And he said, do you need some help?
I appreciate your offer that. Well, you're not doing too good.
I said, I'm doing good, and he said, you don't look so good.
Let me help you, Ben.
So he's like, let me help you.
How do you want to try to do that?
And I said, how do you want to do that? So he decides how he's going to help me. Because again, I'm trying to retain neutral palate. This is his idea of how I need help, not my request for help. So in other words, I'm embracing and accepting his notions of what I need rather than my real life where I would reject it. I would say, oh no, dude, I got it, it's okay, thank you. You have to understand that this space, and again, you know, people are concerned, they want to protect people. Oh, he's helping you and you're being like a jerk to him by taking advantage of his good Samaritan impulses to help you along. But you have to understand that I am there particularly to have a different interaction than no thank you. In my real life, if I'm coming down the street and this guy comes up to me and he's like, are you okay? I'm like, yeah, I'm good, and I just keep going. But because he decided to engage me during the performance process where I was sort of more harvesting these relationships, I allowed him to project onto me his narrative of what I needed in the form of his idea of what help was. So I learned from him what his vision of helping me means. You know, so he walks me over, you know, and he's
I
like, where
wasn't
do you
doing
want to
that
go?
much,
And I'm like, you know,
I don't
I'll
know,
go,
I'm kind of embarrassed
you
now.
know, go this way. Oh, and I'm,
Wait, that's just... Look, man, I appreciate it, man. That's good.
so that's it. I basically knew what, I kind of got an
tried to
idea
make
of
it
what he
happen,
wanted
you
to
know,
do, so I
best I
thanked
can.
him.
Listen, you want to watch me? Yeah, I got two. I got a gold and a silver.
And I always wear like 4 or 5 watches on my arm. I have flowers up my sleeve. I have toe tags on my toes so I can fall over and die and kick my shoe off. There's a lot of different, like, sort of more sort of funny, humorous components to these street
Which
performances.
one, gold or silver? Gold's more valuable than silver, but they're both fake. I'd rather have fake gold than fake silver.
So, you know, these are the type of interactions I actually have in real life where people come up and want to kind of dump on me. Like, he's hugging me. He's
I
like,
love you too, man. Thank you. Thank you for helping me, man.
and he's a veteran. You know, he's an he's like this American war veteran who's in the street, homeless. You know, I mean, that's the street. That's the real street.
Could be anybody. Could be anybody out here.
So yeah, he said it could have been me, and then I said, you know, it could be anybody. So, you know, he said it could have been me on crutches is what he was saying. So that piece is called Traffic, and I developed a trilogy of works called Window, Bench, and Traffic, and each one of them was a different attempt at getting an authentic kind of representation of what happens in the street. And the video before this is called Bench, and this video is about this way of a 360-degree capture. So I throw all this gear into a suitcase, and then I take the suitcase and I put it down. Actually, I think I have an illustration of it. Let me see. I put the suitcase down between my legs and kind of carry it through. Oh, maybe I don't have one. Okay. I thought I had a drawing of that. Nope. Okay. But the nature of the rig. In other words, a big part of my work is building video rigs and developing technical ways to share street performances in authentic ways that I don't have the ability to limit what the viewer sees. So, you know, I throw this suitcase on the skateboard, and there's a little drawing there of it. This was shown publicly in New York a few years ago. But here we go. I'm just going to play a little bit of this for you. I don't know how many of you have actually seen it off the website, but I'll play a little bit of it. So the suitcase full of cameras is on a skateboard rolling beside me, and I'm gliding beside it. And here you can see the illustration. So here's me off of the board, and here's me on the board. And these are the cameras inside the case that are shooting outward in 360 degrees. And so I can both perform in first person to a live audience and also perform for an audience in the video in the round and also ride the rig as well. So the idea was to have both of these approaches and share the street. So here's a little clip of that. And you can see my shadow, kind of what's happening. So in the reflection, you kind of see what the setup is. Right here is a pretty good shot of it. So you see my feet on the board and the suitcase there. And that's how I'm able to capture. So I captured 6 screens in the round in real time and then presented it as a single in the round of video installation. But this is the 2D version of it. So along the bottom is all the shots left to right, and then along the top is the three, and then the 3 on 3. So it's the same image on top and below. It's just that this is arranged for like the installation. But in this way, I was able to kind of capture, you know, the whole interaction with the urban environment and how much of a part of my work that is. And just a couple of moments were really kind of magical here. And you know, again, this is an improvised kind of work where I don't know exactly what I'm going to capture when I capture it, but I'm skating down the street here, and this guy comes along, and he actually skates beside me, and he has a skateboard too. It's really funny little moment. There he is. He's got a suitcase and a skateboard. Nice. And I just thought that was so funny, you know, to be right there and to him to just show up in this. And so we're 2 guys skating down the street, you know, with suitcases in this very kind of random chance encounter, like 1 in a million. I mean, how many people do you see with suitcases skateboarding? So, you know, that's the kind of magic that only happens through improvisation in real time.
Nice briefcase.
Yeah, you can also, I'm mic'd and you can hear everything that's happening and everything that's recording. So again, these are just videos. These are basically what I'm showing you is my attempt to kind of prove in a way what's happening in the street and to back up the phenomenological observations with video sort of quote unquote proof. There's this interaction here that I call gesture of help. And gesture of help is very different than real help. So I'm attempting a no-footer. Well, let me talk about peripheral fluctuation first. Peripheral fluctuation is this idea that in your periphery, people are turning to look, but as soon as you look directly, they look away. So if the fluctuation is always here of people turning to look after you pass by, they're very interested, they want to see what's happening, they look. So in this particular example, he's looking, and then I look toward him, and bam, he looks away. Like I wasn't looking at you. And this is something that people, you know, a lot of people experience for very different reasons, but for me it was sort of a long time in my childhood. And then when I look away, he looks back. So you see that kind of dynamic of peripheral fluctuation where as soon as the periphery of my vision starts to turn, he looks back at, bam. So that's peripheral fluctuation, but what it is the cumulative effect. In other words, this happens to people often, but when you're like representing an ambiguous sort of representation of disability, it happens all the time, constantly. So part of the naming of the phenomenology around projected narrative or other ones such as gesture of help, which is different than real help. In other words, gesture of help, I'm doing a no-footer here, I'm going up the stairs, and another babushka, there's lots of babushkas that go in and out of Russian marketplaces. So she has this idea that now you have to understand the history of Russia. Like when I was in Spain, no elderly woman approached me to help me. When I was in Mexico City, when I was in LA, when I was in New York, when I was in Cairo, none of these places, elderly grandmothers were coming to my aid when I was attempting no-footers on the stairs. But in Russia, babushkas are like the backbone of Russia. When a young man is on crutches, they have a long history of war. So all of a sudden, the geopolitics of disability and injury and what it represents in different locations became a big part of what I realized was happening. And it still is. There's places I'm not invited because dancing on crutches is just seen as just wrong on a very primal level. So they don't even want me there, like certain places. But so this engagement here is gesture of help. In other words, I'm doing the no-footer, and she comes up with a nonverbal intervention, and she grabs my elbow. Okay, and so this is her idea of going to help me up the stairs. Now, I weigh about 190. There is no way that this elderly babushka is going to, I mean, maybe she did throw like 190 pounds of wood on her back and hike 10 miles through the tundra to heat her home for her family, but she's trying to help me, and so I started developing strategies. In other words, if someone expresses gesture of help with a physical intervention that's nonverbal, then I do what I call a strategy called reflection of help. A reflection of help means if you make a gesture of help to me, I'm going to make a gesture of help to you immediately so that we're even. Because again, it gets back to the whole jackassification of public interaction where like, oh, my zipper's stuck and I've got a cast on. Can you zip my zipper up? And that's not really what I was trying to explore here. I was trying to get back to my real life. So she takes my inner elbow, and then I immediately take her hand here. So I'm helping her help me up the stairs in order to even accept her pathway. Like, I'm curious, what does she mean by, how is she actually planning on helping me? Or is she expressing our shared humanity in this moment? And I believe that she is. She's saying, I know what struggle is. People who don't know struggle don't help. So the more struggle you experience, the more opportunities you will take to help other people. So I'm helping her help me. And there she takes my elbow again. And you can see my hand go around her back. And so we're kind of standing there almost in a position like this. It's like this classic couples dance position where we're dancing together. And, it's just a very beautiful, still moment. And for me, I was just trying to understand and accept and embrace what she was sharing with me, what she was giving to me in that moment. But she surprised me here. because normally I just go straight up the stairs, but she decided that we had to go sideways on a stair. So all of a sudden I'm on this wild ride. And not only that, but this inner elbow grab across the front high bar of the crutch pushes the crutch that way. So I'm using my shoulder hold, my armpit hold technique up here to keep this crutch from popping out backwards because of this push with her wrist here on the elbow, and I'm arching my arm out to accept her hand there. So I'm also modifying and using my own skills of a long history of being on crutches for her help to actually not make it more difficult. I mean, it does make it more difficult, but to not ruin the experience of us going up together. So we finally keep going sideways, and I realize, and you see me point there, is there's this little tiny puddle. I mean, it's literally like this tiny strip of water because the stair is slightly indented, and I'm like, is that what we're going around? Because I don't speak Russian, you know, I like da, spasiba, pожалуйста, you know, and das vidanya, and that's about it. So, you know, I have no idea exactly, and all these interactions are nonverbal, but I notice there's this puddle. I'm like, that's what we're avoiding. Okay. So should we finally go sideways up the stairs for a bit, and then I continue using reflection of help to help me up the stairs. And you see, I actually physically take her inner elbow at the same time that she's taking mine. I get up ahead of her and try to balance out the situation, because it's a very delicate kind of thing to have these moments with people where you know, they're really invested, they're really in the moment in a way that it's just it's beautiful, really, and touching. So now that I've kind of talked a little bit about the phenomenology, I just want to talk about one other. Well, how much time do we have? Oh, 15, great, okay. So the other thing I wanted to talk about was the history of the crutches, because people are, you know, like, what kind of crutches are those? What are, you know, blah, blah, blah. So I brought kind of a picture of my quiver of crutches that I have been using over the years. And basically, I started out on single point crutches, and this is a really early picture of me doing some street performance using the antique single point crutch. Because a lot of people interpret like what I'm doing, oh, you need those special crutches to do those crazy moves. Well, you don't actually need those special crutches for the crazy moves. They do make the moves more dynamic. There's certain things you can't do on these antique crutches, but the reason that antique crutches are so amazing is because it's one piece of wood. It's single grain all the way through, and the wood is split and then bent. So instead of what you get now, which is like laminate, it's pressed together with glue, and they're individual pieces that are assembled with bolts. Old school antique crutches are one piece of like really good hard wood that is split and made into a crutch. And so your flex on your crutch is synchronous on both. The grain is bending in the same way on both sides, and they're much stronger and much more powerful for dancing on crutches. So when you're ready to start your dance career on crutches, and you don't have the rocker bottom crutch around, try to find some antique ones at an antique store, because they are truly far superior to a laminate crutch. Now, this is the rocker bottom crutch, and there were different iterations of the crutch. And let me just walk over here and kind of talk about like how these modifications happened. Maybe we could bring up the house lights a little brighter for a second. I think I still have that pen in my pocket. Yeah. Okay. So let me put this down here for a second. The first crutch is a regular old, you know, hospital issue crutch that I got when I was like 5 or 6 years old. And those crutches are the laminate style. They kind of look like, you know, like this type of deal. Come down here, right? And they bend in, and they come down and there's a tip. And there's 2 bolts here. There's your handle here, your little wing nut, and this. So the first thing that you do as a child when you're playing on your crutches is you slice open your arm or the inside of your thigh on the wing nut. So the first modification was I got my dad to put a bolt on it that didn't have a wing nut so that it would be smooth, so that when I did all kinds of tricks, it wouldn't hurt. The second thing that happened is once you start really getting crazy on the crutches, they start to really fall apart. In this section here, they'll snap right here, and right here. So I started breaking the crutches there. So then what I did, me and my dad were kind of like, my dad would help me kind of modify them. And, but what we came up with was taking pieces of the broken crutches here and adding a second handle. So then I had crutches as a kid that looked like that. They were like little freestyler crutches with double handles, but still the traditional I call these single point laminates. Still this traditional single point laminate. But what this did was strengthen this here, and then with the bolts still came through here, and here, and here, and here. But what this did was it allowed the flex to be more limited. Oh, thank you. That helps a little bit. Can people see? Can you guys see this? Okay. So this is what the history of the play was from 75 to like 81. I used these type of crutches. I had various braces with them, but this is how they kept getting modified. After this, what we started doing was pressing these, drilling out these holes and making them bigger and putting fatter bolts in, and to make this even stronger here. And that was pretty much the limit of where I went from 81. Then in 1994, I was given a pair of rocker bottom crutches, which look like this. All right? There's a tip that came off the end here like this. And there was the higher tubes that went like this, here and here. Okay, and this is the standard rocker bottom crutch with the handle here. And this is adjustable, like kind of like that. I think it was only like about that. But these weren't up here, but you know, you get the idea. And then these also had holes in them here so that you could adjust. So these are hospital issue, and then they had two little pins here. Now, when I moved to Chicago in the 90s and I attended the School of the Art Institute of Chicago, is when my disability reemerged. In other words, when I was, in 1981, I got off my crutches. I learned how to street dance, how to skateboard. I got into performance art. You know, but I had limitations. I couldn't jump off of things. I couldn't run very far. But I could still dance like boogaloo style, but I never got into like big jumping hip hop. And I'd skate with like a fluid, flowing, freestyling, like wheelies and stuff, but I never jumped off of big stuff. I mean, I did occasionally, and I paid for it. I'm actually, that might be part of the reason that the reemergence of my condition was so early, you know, because the hips weren't round, but I was also like skateboarding around, like getting crazy. So, so anyway, then my hips started to get really bad, and I'm like, oh my God, like I can no longer skate. I can't break dance. I have to quit doing these two activities that I've been doing since the mid-'80s. And it was a really hard and depressing time for me. And I first started using a cane because my hips would hurt so bad, and Chicago has really big blocks, like Toronto, you know, those long stretching blocks. And so I started using canes, and I realized like I'm so familiar on crutches that I started using a crutch again. That went to the doctor. The doctor said, oh, you should probably get a hip replacement bilaterally, which means replacing both sides. So then I did a lot of research and went to 3 other doctors and discovered that hip replacements don't actually last, especially for young people. It's great if you're 65, 75, and you want to get a hip replacement, you got a new life, yeah, yeehaw. But if you're in your 30s or 20s, you definitely don't want, even in your 40s, you don't want to get a total hip, especially bilaterally, because then in 10 to 15 years, you have to get another one. If you're lucky, 10 to 15, sometimes it's worse, and especially for someone with an active lifestyle like me. Like, I can't stop moving. I'm constantly moving. So when you have that situation, I did all the research and realized that I would probably be better off just to stay on crutches, and I found a doctor who was supportive of that concept and gave me painkillers, et cetera, which, you know, go into the whole drug element of pain reduction, but let's just say that I like natural options far superior to the pharmaceutical option. So I was skating around the city with these single point crutches, and there was a disabled student there, and we started this group called Art of Access, well, basically because she was being treated like crap by the administration at the School of the Art Institute of Chicago. So I decided to help her, and we made this organization and got a counselor specifically for disability issues and getting doors taken out and automatic doors put in. I mean, it was a real You know how institutions get. So it was a real battle. But anyway, these people called Lumex made this crutch. Now this crutch was actually designed in the 1930s, and it looked like a single point, and that it came down like this, same way, right? But then it went into this. So it was like a rocking chair crutch, which is really horrifying, actually. If you think about any kind of accident, you can get impaled here on this like crazy rocker bottom tip. But if you look up, I looked up a bunch of the copyrights for crutches because I have a specific design for technical tricks and freestyle tricks on a skateboard with the rocker bottom. So this was the original rocker bottom. Anyway, this company called Lumex evolved that to this other shape here, which is over here. And I'd always, every single time I could ever look at a different shaped crutch, I would I have a massive collection of crutches. I have like hundreds of different pairs of crutches at my house. And some of them I've used for installation art, but most of them I just collect them for their various like weird quirks. But everybody has a crutch design, I swear to God. Like, there's so many crazy crutch designs out there. So this was the Lumex model that I was given. Like, I don't like these. They make me feel like I'm rocking back and forth, she said. And she had these leopard skin coated, like, cool crutches with, like, velvet. She had velvet and leopard skin, and she was just like, she loved her crutches. She was so used to them. So she gave them to me. She said, here, you can have them. And so all of a sudden, this action that I was able to experience, so when I'm skateboarding on a single point, the range of that single point is very limited. It's more like this. But when you're able to set a rocker bottom here and roll this all the way over to here, so you have the front angle, and then you have the back angle, you have a lot more pull, whereas a single point won't grab over here. It'll grab like here, So you'll have, your range is much smaller. So this all of a sudden opened up this amazing, and I broke them in 1 week. I got them, I was like, this is great, and then snap. So what I realized was that this was never going to survive. This was just 2 little pins and a tip. So this is the first thing that went. So then I would take this off and slide. I went to an automotive supply place, and I found high-pressure coolant hose that was used in vehicles that had like a synthetic rubber with plastic blended into it. And I started taking this piece off and sliding this. I would just take the tube and slide that tube over and put it there. And then I got pipe clamps. So that was the first modification of the rocker bottom crutch, was to do this. These were also breaking here and here. And so I had a gig and I had to leave, and I had broken a crutch. So I made a pair that were solid chrome, and it was the first single bar rocker bottom. In other words, it's one piece. There's no adjustment. It's custom. So this was customized to my height, and it was extremely simple, which makes it much more durable. So I had my bolt here, I had my tube coming through like that, and I had the radiator hose with the pipe clamp here, and that was the new style. But it had to be a very narrow circumference of tubing, or it would really hurt when it would fall. Like for certain moves, your hand is used to catch the crutch. So if I go like this and like that, I stop the crutch with an open finger move. So I can just push and catch. Boom, bring it back. So that's called a high bar thread. So a high bar thread to high mid position, which I talked about before. And this is called in the saddle. So I have a high bar thread to high mid position. So right now I'm in a saddle high mid split. Okay, so there's all this technique around dancing and moving on crutches that I've named. So there's a whole lexicon, not only of phenomenology, but of the physical dancing and the way that the dancing has particular movements and names based on what at the end or what your attempt to achieve is. So one of the limitations of chrome steel crutches as opposed to lightweight aluminum was I was getting hurt a lot with these type of moves I was doing. So, and they also, when they would bend, they wouldn't flex back. So they were not ideal. Also, the other thing that happened here is these crutches would break here. Now, if you notice, you can see here where it snapped right here. This tube would crack. And so I went and started welding before I went to the single bar. After I went to the single bar, and they were hurting my hands and hurting anything they hit, my ankles, I would ding myself up. So I went back to the aluminum and I welded the aluminum bar so that it would be one continuous piece rather than adjustable. And that helped a lot, but they still weren't very strong, and they ended up snapping like this. And just as a detail that I haven't really gotten into with the relationship of the crutches to the skateboard, was I was actually wearing out holes in the grip tape from the tips of my crutches. So right here and here are where my crutches sit on the board when I'm riding it. And it's sort of a different, I started really looking at the relationship I had to the skateboarding world and the differences and the similarities in sort of the physical manifestations of the form. So again, this piece was, this was plastic. This was plastic, this was plastic, and this was a weak plastic. This was the first to go, then this started, and this went. So this new chrome pair was wood and steel. And then when I started working for Cirque du Soleil, they said, you know, we want you to be the main character of the show. And I actually turned them down. I said, I can't do that. I'm really involved in my own work. I was doing this whole phenomenology, public street performances. I just couldn't just join the show and be like the star of the show. So I said, what I'll do is I'll train somebody to do what I do. I'll join the creative team and we'll conceptualize my character and I'll train somebody to do it. And that's the birth of the necessity of language, extreme detail of language. In other words, when you go from in the saddle to a high bar thread, you go to a trigger finger hold, which is here. This finger here is very necessary for certain maneuvers if you're trying to teach somebody different maneuvers. So, and I call all of that material Shannon technique. And Shannon technique is another sort of world of lexicon of the movement, but they're very related to the crutch. Like the names of the moves in Shannon technique are directly connected to the crutches. So for example, the high bar thread is named after the high bar. This is the low bar, this is the rocker bottom tip, this is the handle, this is the saddle here. So your saddle, high bar. Now, when you're actually on the crutch, you're positioning your body in relationship to it. So I thread through the high bar, but then I push my forearm against the front inside of the high bar. So I'm pushing right there, and you see that force come out. Well, you know, when you're telling somebody to do this, you know, if I were to ask somebody to come up right now and do a high bar thread to high mid position and I make it look, you would have a very hard time doing it, most likely. If anybody want to try, I mean, you're welcome to. Maybe in the Q&A, I don't know when that's going to be, pretty soon. But so I went from the solid chrome tube to aircraft grade aluminum single tube, which is what I use now. And in the process of making that, I started to realize, like, wouldn't it be amazing if I could put shocks right here? And then instead of like having like the bounce movement and to be able to spring up, because one of the things that's very limiting with dancing on crutches is that I don't have the ability to jump because the hips won't take it. So a lot of dancing, you know, dancing on crutches is an inverse to the physics of dancing on your feet. In other words, you dance on your feet and you're waving your arms and you jump, da-da-da, and that's it. When you dance on crutches, all your weight's in your armpits and you can wave your feet as much as you want. So it's like your expression becomes this part of your body while you hold your weight up here. So this is more still. In other words, your weight is centered right here, so you can't go very far with it. So the physics of the dancing on crutches is reversed, and the same with skateboarding. Like, I can skate and I can do a little ollie, but I can't ollie over stairs or ollie any distance because I'm basically limited to the arc of the reach of the crutch. So I can ollie, I can go pop just to here, but I could never like skate, ollie, and like ollie over like a bench or anything like that. This is not happening. So this is the shock absorbing pair is up here with the green handle at the very top. And beside it are some tips that I took off. But that, you can see the shock absorbing chamber in there, which I took elastomer out of a bicycle fork, and with help from a guy who has tools to work with titanium, we made a titanium tube shock absorbing crutch, and this is what it looked like here. So we had the chamber of elastomer in here, and it worked okay, but the problem was when you compress and you have lateral force at the same time, and the two tubes are compressing at different rates, you basically, it just kinks up. If I try anything really complex, it just kinks up. So that was difficult a difficult problem to solve in shock absorbing rocker bottom crutches. Here's a picture of what the tips look like when they wear out. They wear out in the middle, and then I pull them off and replace them. So here's one of the tricks that I wanted to show you guys. This is a video installation called Attempts, And it's about success and failure and the dancing on the crutches. So you can see, like, it's a move called a flare Japan tuck, and the flare is here, flare on the right, and then I tuck this crutch under, and I spin that around and then come off. But it's a trick that has a high rate of failure. So what I did was I basically put success and failure next to each other to kind of show, just like in sort of skateboarding and the urban sort of cultures that exist in these things. Now there's another move, so that just loops, and it's a video installation piece that I did a couple years ago. And this is called a sweeper kick out, crossed up heel hold, no-handed rotation. This is a very technical move. How much time do I have? So this is a sweeper kick out, crossed up heel hold, no-handed rotation. So what that is a combination move where I start out with the sweeper, and the sweeper looks like this. Sweep, I sweep the floor across with the crutch. Now at the end of that sweeper, when it stops, I kick out. I do a kick out. I kick my leg through and out. So that's the sweeper to kick out, and then I do a crossed up heel hold, which means I cross my heel up right here to hold the crutch, and in here I thread through the low bar with my toe. So that's the sweeper kick out to crossed up heel hold. And then the no-handed rotation is when I let go with my hand here. You see my hand here and here both holding the crutches. And as I lift with that heel, I'm able to let go with both hands. So that's a sweeper kick out, crossed up heel hold, no-handed rotation. Now you can also see that I'm using my legs a little bit. Like I said before, you know, this is why people were like, you're faking, you don't really need those. Because I do a move like this and everybody goes, oh, you just got crushed. And then they say, oh, he's faking, so maybe not. So I'm going to show it in real time now. Yeah, so I mean, that's the move. Thank you. So the dynamic point of the move is this, you know, you cannot have shock absorption once this lateral, this perfectly vertical crutch, all my body weight bends that crutch. You can see the bend here. There's an arc here that the crutch bows out right where my hip presses into it. So what was happening is the compression in the low bar was uneven, and so it would cause the shock absorption to kink up. So I kind of gave up on that trajectory, but it was a really interesting and exciting exploration into, you know, the possibilities available as having a shock absorbing rocker bottom crutch. So like I said, with these presentations before, I kind of jump all over the place. And one of the strategies that I try to do in public space, this is traffic, the bus piece that I did in Chicago was where that one was, but this one's in New York. So this is an entirely different piece where I was kind of doing this interaction with this sculpture to kind of mimic the sculpture, because dancing on crutches is a little bit like architecture. And you know, there's that saying about architecture and dance, you know. And I forget what it is, but it's basically like you dance, something about architecture and dance. Anyway, never mind. So these vertical lines are so rigid and controlling, and the organic shape of the body. So it's literally a figurative draping over vertical post. In the same way that you might build a building or create a sculpture, you know, dancing on crutches requires you not just to dance with your body, but also to position the crutches in ways that are also spatially and dynamically dance. Not just like you use the crutches so that your body can dance, but rather you're also dancing the shape of these vertical lines into the organic form. So it's having like these two dances happening, and you have to make them both like look like they're working. In other words, your body could be dancing great, but if your crutches are all askew, then the whole thing gets messed up. So when you're actually dancing, and the same thing with the wheelchair or any other assistive device or even a prop, like a lot of, you know, props used in theater and film and whatnot. So, you know, I'm doing this kind of interpretive dance and mimicking the shape. So you see how this shape is kind of coming off here, and I'm, you know, kind of mimicking the same kind of spatial use of sculpture. So I call that sculptural integrity, and that's really important. Like when I was bending over and picking up the bottle with the babushka, the same thing. I was employing sculptural integrity. In other words, I wasn't, you know, I wasn't simply doing the move, but rather really draping my form. So I started doing a bunch of drawings about these street performances, and they just became almost more symbolic as they were a dance. And so these are like illustrations of different sort of relationships, and then also sort of a more metaphoric winged kind of crutches as wings, and have just gone down this more of a note-taking. I mean, these are just scans out of my notebook. I mean, it's not like I've painted massive canvases and I'm treating them like they're fine art and everything, but they are notes on performance, and they're relevant to the street material. And again, like I was saying before, not only was I involved in dance, but I was involved in a lot of installation art and really urban arts, and finding these artifacts and creating different sculptural presentations out of it. And that's really where my work is now. Like the most recent work I've been doing is this series of performances for multiple cameras, and basically what I'm doing is I'm capturing all these angles at the same time. So this is like camera, 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 like that, right? And what I'm able to do then is take that camera and where's that? To take all those angles and combine them into like this sort of abstract. And I didn't mean to use this footage of it, but that's what I have right now. But you can see on the surface there this kind of character that's me kind of moving through. I'm setting up a piece that Hirschhorn has like a night event, and I brought my dance crew out there, but I also did this video installation. No, it's not very big. Maybe you can't really see it. Let's see if it's, I think maybe it's here. No. Okay. So that's my most recent work is these multi-channel video installations that, again, deal with the sort of abstraction of the body. So I'm pulling up that footage now of that same shoot, that same video that I just showed you with the multi-camera takes. This is what it results in, which is a kind of a fragmented presentation of the dance, and the abstraction of the body and the way that the crutches kind of work with that. So you kind of see. And I've been very interested in presenting dance dynamically in video in a way that's abstracted but kind of tells of a larger truth in a way of the dance. So that's it. Thank you very much, everybody. Yeah, absolutely. So anybody who has any questions, please feel free to toss them out. I love questions. Accusations? Insults. Oh, here's one. Insult.
That last piece that we saw was the first time I actually heard the crutches. Does sound play a part in your performances as well? Is that something that you try and control?
Yeah, absolutely. Like, for example, the traffic piece, like there's multiple layers of sound. Like I was wearing a mic on my mouth, but I also had a mic on the bottom of the skateboard that was transmitting back to the bus. So you would hear and then I would talk to somebody, and I had a mic on my hand, so when they would talk to me, I would try to get my hand or my face close enough to get the mic. So it's very important for me in terms of like capturing the authenticity of that moment to have the media support, because in a theatrical situation, you're right there, you're in the audience, the lights go down, there's the stage. You hear everything, you see everything, it's perfect. However, for my work in exploring the phenomenology, you have to be able to hear what's happening, but not be there. So the whole like wireless technology and miking everything and getting the sounds to really pop is really, really a big part of it, along with the visuals. But yes, without, with the way those crutches sounded, that had a little bit of an effect on it. Like I sharpened that and just tried to make the fragmentation of it, because it looked, I was looking at it, it's like a prism. It was like, glass. It was metal and glass and bone, and it was just kind of. So I pushed that, just like took it into Sound Designer and Cubase and just played with filters until I got the sound right. But they do sound. I mean, if you rub, that sound is there. That's what you hear, but it just has a little more effect on it.
Kind of reminded me of like tap, the way that they use the tap as part of.
Yeah, that's something I do when I'm actually in a competitive dance and the music stops. I start to go boom, 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 but it's like a dance. Like I could actually show you that one. I mean, the problem with hearing that was that it's a marble floor seat, but on a wooden floor, it's like poof, 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 like that. So yeah. Yes. I don't do workouts. It's very painful over any type of dancing that I do. My hip isn't round, so it's like rotating a square peg in a round hole. So my performance is almost processional. In other words, I don't rehearse. I build pieces so that I can expand and contract my physical ability within them. So I have like a solo piece. It's an hour and a half with like a 20-minute video section. But the performance itself, I built so that I have this music, but I can dance to it more on a more gentle kind of, where I can sustain it, or if I feel really good that day, I can do more power. But I never like perform in a room by myself. Just doesn't happen. So it's like I just have to do this performance and I just do it. I don't really rehearse or practice as much as I frame sections and then create transitions between them. And I know the style of those parts of the movements. And all of my movements were invented in real time. In other words, I'm at the club, I'm dancing, I do a sweeper, and I stop, and then I feel like, oh, maybe I can do that. And that's how all this evolved out of play. So it all goes back to the fact that in my childhood, it was creative necessity. In other words, there's the privilege of spare time and creativity within spare time, or creativity for creative sake. And then there's necessity, creative necessity, which is what I identified in my childhood, where basically like all my peers just ran and jumped over a bush in the neighbor's yard. If I want to jump over that bush, I have a necessity right now to create a solution. I do not have time to think about it. It's not something I choose to want to do. It's happening to me right now. So creative necessity is a sort, almost like a survival instinct. And I kind of still go back to that just guttural sense of creative movement. And I don't understand gyms. I don't understand the whole, I mean, I like to swim, but I just don't understand. I don't have that way of like, I'm going to, okay, this next one's going to be great. No, I just never do that. So, yes.
Hi. You're a performer, and a brave one at that, because you kind of throw yourself out into public and you allow them to react however they want to your work. But you're also, you put yourself in a position where you can accept help. And that got me thinking that you must see a lot of performing onto you, because some people might be nurturing, but maybe there's the occasion where someone just seems to be helping just for the sake of making themselves feel good or whatever. But from your life as a performer and whatnot, how do you kind of keep yourself stable or keep a neutral palette when you're constantly faced with judging if someone's help is genuine or not, or if it matters, or like how does it weigh down on you when other people reach out to you constantly?
Okay, yeah, that phenomena of people reaching out, their empathy, I call it weight of empathy. That's another, there's a lot of phenomena I didn't go through. Condition arriving, weight of empathy. I mean, there's many other ones. But weight of empathy is sort of like, I have a story where I got on a crowded train. I had my skateboard with me. I got on, I took a beat, nobody was moving out of a chair. I was tired, I sat down. I grabbed my crutch here, like this, hold it with my knee. They take up very little space on the train, and I sit on the train like this. I take up very little space. So once I get to that position, and I'm sitting there, the people riding on the train with me notice that I'm sitting on the floor. Then they'll stand up. So I'm there, this is husband and wife, and the wife's like nudging, like, he's sitting on the floor. So then he gets up and like, here, take my seat. Here, take it. But for me, I'm like, oh, no, thank you, it's okay. And the guy's like, no, you can take it. And then everybody's looking at me like, why doesn't he sit in the chair? Like, what's his problem? So that's weight of empathy. In other words, their empathy is kindness being projected onto me. And I'm not receiving. I'm not accepting it. I'm saying no thank you, which is an insult, really. Some people take it like, oh, so there's backlash. Another example of weight of empathy is I go into a restaurant. And the receptionist clears off a table right there. It's the table that she does her paperwork on. And so the table's cleared. It's like, here, sit here. But it's a cold day. It's a small restaurant. There's a cold breeze blowing in. I don't want, whenever it's cold, I hate getting like cold air on my leg because then it starts to hurt. So I'm like, do you mind if we sit in the back? And then she's like, wait a second. I just made this thing for you, and now you're special. You know what I'm saying? So it's like weight of empathy again, where people are, and totally human, acceptable. I don't blame people or anyone for making an effort to, somehow modify the behavior to make room for me. And that's really called, that's another phenomena called the condition arriving. Now the condition is like, it's a mirage that you never reach. Your condition arrives before your name does. It arrives before your body does. It's ahead of you. People see it coming. Oh, there's a guy on crutches coming. That's the condition. Before Bill Shannon actually wants to sit in the back because it's cold, the condition arrived and said, Bill Shannon needs to sit right here in this chair because he can't walk very far. So it's a conflict between, what my real world and who I am versus what the world perceives me as in a very real world way. Like people will move. Let's say I'm going towards the entrance to the subway, and there's a cafe right next to it. And the cafe has a bunch of chairs. Well, I'll start walking towards it. It looks like I'm going towards the cafe, and people start moving chairs around. And then I go in the subway. Well, my condition arrived at the chairs, and I went to the subway. And they're two different things. But I see mine. I see it ahead, so I have strategies. And so this is, again, getting back into this phenomenology and sociological kind of landscape and the shifting landscape. Go ahead.
I'm really interested in the lexicon that you've created in conjunction with Shannon technique and creating a kind of a theoretical framework for your own relationship to your crutches and to being in the world and to gestures, your gestures in response. And I'm wondering if anyone else, that you're aware of anyone else that's taken up this theorizing and sort of applied it outside of, the Shannon technique, but to other ways of being in the world.
Absolutely. Well, because I talk about this stuff and I've traveled around the world, like giving these presentations, I've had people come up to me and like, I have a problem. I have, a disability that's not visible. When I get on the bus, I'm in severe pain and I want to sit down, and it's in a disabled seat when there's none of it available. If there's a seat that's available, it's not a disabled, I'll sit there. But sometimes I have to sit in the disabled seat. But then people look at me real mean, like I'm a bad person for sitting there because it doesn't look like there's anything wrong with me. And I said, use blowfish. It's like, what does that mean? Well, that means when you go in, lay across every single disabled seat that you can possibly cover with your body. Everybody will look at you mean, and then sit up and just take one seat. And it'll be over. And you'll host their negative reaction, their backlash to you. You will host it and have more ownership. And you can take it as far as you want. You could lay down for a long time or, this type of thing. And then, and I met this same person later, and it's like, I used it and it worked really well. Thank you so much. It's a completely different feeling I have. I no longer feel subject. I am now host. And that's really a power dynamic. I was subject for so long, all those years of my childhood, subject to other people's ideas about, and then not having the mentality to try and realize that I could invite and kind of own in a very different way this same thing that was happening to me. I would end up sitting in the chair next to the front door when I was a kid, even though maybe I didn't want to, So those type of situations cumulatively led to this. In other words, it wasn't just one moment of projected narrative. It's every day, all day. You know, anytime you're going from point A to point B in the public space, you're interacting with the random people who have projected narratives. They have heroic narratives, tragic narratives. They have, you know, you're not really needing that. You're escape, you know, et cetera. So, next question. Oh, down. Oh, there's one.
I'm just wondering what, I mean, it's one thing to train a able-bodied dancer that's been doing dancing so they can crutches, and I'm just wondering what your experience has been in training people with various disabilities to dance when they felt like maybe their bodies were broken or they were unable to dance. What's that experience like? How does language play a part?
Do you mind restating the question? I know it's a pretty long question, but it's for the
Got
print.
it. I'm just wondering what, I mean, it's one thing to train a classically or able-bodied dancer to dance as though they had crutches.
Yeah.
But I'm just curious about your experience in training and teaching people with disabilities to dance when they've been sort of made to feel as though that's an impossibility.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So when I was a student at School of the Arts in Chicago, I was on an independent study, and I worked for the Mayor's Office for People with Disabilities, and I handled developmentally disabled adults and severely disabled adults, and getting them from the places where they were living, assisted care living situations, pulling them into these city venues, like we had a big gym in one place, et cetera. And it was called recreational skills building, because disabled people you don't think of recreation as a skill, you think of it as just recreation. But for someone whose every movement in their life has been about the practicality and the utility, and there's been no space for just movement for movement's sake, you actually need to develop that skill. It's something that you don't really have a common experience with. So through working for the city of Chicago for a year, and overseeing an entire program of teaching people who had no experience with dance how to move, I learned a tremendous amount about how to introduce it and different ways of working, and I did all kinds of research, and so yeah, I have a lot of experience with that, and my experience has been very positive. And one of the things I learned to do, and it gets back to the whole theory and notion of an authentic form being born from the seed of a different experience. In other words, it's not emulating an able-bodied form, and that's where it got into the utilitarian patterns that each individual person with different types of physical or developmental disabilities develops in their life to get through their life. So, you know, one person would get out of bed and make their bed with their elbows and knees. I mean, they didn't have forearms and didn't have, you know, so basically this was a dance, but they didn't think of it as a dance. They thought of it as just they had to make the bed. And so we started harvesting all these utilitarian movements that people were doing every day in their real life, and saying, okay, let's take those as roots, let's take those as seeds and develop creative movement out of them. So it wasn't like forcing them to do things they never did. I was taking things they took for granted that didn't even think about because it was second nature, because they'd been doing it their entire lives, and instead of treating it like something they had to do, I treated it like it was something that we were going to have fun doing and change through repetition, through elaboration, and through design, through editing. So we would come up with like 10 movements. So I would have, the first thing we would do is track their daily life. So I get out of bed, I go to the bathroom, I leave the house, I go down the stairs, I get on the bus, I get off the bus, I go here, da-da-da. And we would take that and harvest all these creative movements out of it. And then we'd take those movements, and those would be our seed movements. And then we would go through each one, and everybody would learn other people's moves. And then we would slowly narrow down the movements to the most compelling, emotive, and just jaw-dropping, tear-jerking humanity. I mean, it was incredible what the material we came up with, you know, out of these workshops. And so yes, and that's been my experience with that. Sorry for my long answers. Yes. Oh, good. Hold on, wait for the mic.
How many people have applied your technique? Can you give us some numbers? How many other people have applied your technique or learned?
Oh, you mean just the technique on crutches?
how to move when you have some disability, how to.
I don't know. I never really counted the number of people. I mean, I just did my programs. You know, they were more about numbers. I was just about figuring out a great way to teach and a great way to have these experiences. So in terms of actually numbers of people that I worked with, I mean, in the hundreds for sure, but I don't have a number really. And as far as the Shannon technique is concerned, I mean, the part of the problem with disability and establishing a technique that's continuous among multiple people is that the nature of disabilities is very singular. So everybody's is a little bit different details. So you have to have these kind of looser groupings where you're not, you know, like with able-bodied dance, you know, like ballet, they edit everybody who can't turn their ankles out. If you can't turn your ankles out all the way, dude, you're out of here. You know, you're gone. You're not good enough. We are the best. Well, in disability, you know, it's really hard to have like, we are the elite, because everybody's just got these little variables. So it's kind of a looser fitting of these general directions and general techniques that somebody who uses crutches could use, but maybe somebody who's learning my technique only has use of one leg that they can bear weight in, not both legs. Maybe they can bear weight in that leg 100%, which I don't normally do. I only bear weight in my legs when I'm dancing on crutches, and I try to keep all the, you know, the 100% of weight across 4 points or 3 points, not on one leg, you know, and I try to avoid that as much as possible. So again, the strategies for developing authentic movement from the disabled experience is really a practice of, you know, harvesting these specific stories of individuals, but also developing commonalities among those people, and from that taking a body and making a generality about a general type of disability. You know what I'm saying? So the medical world has their gradations, but sometimes when it comes to dancing, there's a gut level that will transcend somebody's abilities just in dancing that wouldn't transcend in real world function. So you could have somebody who dances really funky and just right from the heart, non-stop, you know, it could be 100 people watching, doesn't matter. Like, this person is just so deeply connected to their core of wanting to just dance, where their capability to dance transcends their real world ability to function day to day.
Bill, thank you so much.
Hey, thank you. Thank you all very much.
Wonderful and
Cheers.
encouraging. Thank you.